Well, if I were sitting where you are, the first question I'd have in my mind is, what does Dale mean by exceptional? It's a relative term, right? Well, I can tell you when I was in corporate, my team and I, the most dramatic result we got was to cut 16,000 hours out of a 40,000 hour budget. So a 40% improvement. Plus, we were constantly improving the information we were providing to management so that they could make better or more informed decisions. One of my clients, when I coached her on this system, cut her billing cycle from 3 weeks to 2 days, and she did it within a month. As a result of that, she freed up $350,000 worth of cash, paid off her line of credit, which I know as bankers you don't want to hear, and left it untapped for 4 months, right? So, that's what I mean by exceptional. And the key to this is helping people become more focused. And that's really all that happened with my client. The billing cycle was taking 3 weeks to complete. They didn't add any people, they didn't work overtime, they didn't change the computer system. They simply were more focused and developed more and streamlined processes to get the billing out more quickly and more effectively. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. How do you go about doing that? The thing that I found that works really well is that once a week I would meet with my direct reports and I'd ask them to set their goals and priorities for the coming week. And it's important that they be participants in that. If I dictate the goals and priorities to them, they're going to resist that. But if they're involved in setting those themselves, then they're going to buy into it a lot more readily and they're going to be a lot more interested in making sure that those results are achieved. And so really my role in those meetings was just to listen to what their goals and priorities were, and only when I thought maybe one goal was more important than another, typically it was a prioritization issue, that I would step in and instead of telling them, well, I think this would be higher than that, I'd ask them, well, why is this more important than that? And using that question was really important because, again, I wasn't dictating to them what they should be doing. I was asking a question, why is A more important than B? And sometimes I learned that their priorities were right, that there was something I wasn't aware of, and it helped me understand the process a lot better and be more familiar with what was going on in my own department. If I didn't agree with them, then I'd ask them a few questions that would guide them to see the things that I was seeing, and ultimately often they would realize that what I was seeing really should make A be the priority over A. So they were involved in that decision-making process, and they'd set their goals and priorities for the coming week, and each one of them would do that. Now, I've had people ask me, well, why didn't you just do that one-on-one? Why did you have all 8 or 10 people in the room at the same time saying their goals and priorities? Isn't that a big waste of time? And the answer is no, it's not a waste of time, because when people make commitments verbally in public, they're more inclined to keep them. So when they're making these commitments in front of their peers, and they know they're going to have to report back the following week on their success to the team, not to me, to the team, it helps them stay focused and helps them remain much more committed. So the peer pressure that exists is a very, very beneficial aspect of all this. Now, they set their goals and priorities, and then they go about their tasks the following week. And I used to like to set, and this can vary from manager to manager, department to department, but I like to have these meetings on Friday afternoon, mid to late afternoon. So when they came in Monday morning, they knew exactly what they were going to be doing, what the priorities were. There was none of this, gee, I wonder where I ought to start, or what I have to get done. They all knew exactly what they needed to do when they came in on Monday morning. The other thing that it allowed me to do, and frankly I got into trouble with this, is that on Friday afternoon, if I held it early enough, especially if they had had a really productive week and I held the meeting early enough, we got finished with the meeting, I'd let them go early, let them go home early. Now, we can't always do that. And I got into trouble with that because the owners of the company said, you know, I don't care that you're doing that, but everybody else in the company is complaining because your folks get to go home early and they don't on a Friday afternoon. So we had to switch to pizza and ice cream and stuff like that. But there are ways to reward them for doing exceptional work. So that's the first meeting. The initial meeting, we set the goals and priorities. And one of the things I do in that setup of the initial meeting is tell them that I need their help, that I don't know everything that they're doing and everything that's involved in what they're doing, but that together we can become a lot more productive. And so it's not, again, me dictating to them, it's me recognizing that they have a lot of value to add, and people really appreciate that. The subsequent meeting, every subsequent meeting, we would first celebrate successes. So we'd go around the table and everybody would talk about what they had accomplished the previous week. And I think that's one of the things we don't really do well in this country. We're always looking at the to-do list. We're always looking at the things that have to be done yet that we didn't get to, and we're feeling stressed about it. And we don't take time to realize what it is that we really accomplished and how much we accomplished, and find joy and satisfaction in that. So that was always the first step in the subsequent meeting, was to celebrate those successes. And one of the things that I saw happen as a result of that is that people's confidence grew. When they began to realize how much they were accomplishing on a weekly basis, they were pretty impressed. They were pretty satisfied. And they should have been, because they did good work. So it helped them. And one of the things I found interesting was that over time, their goals became more aggressive because they were more confident. And we were continuously doing new things and improving what we were doing. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing we did is, if somebody didn't achieve all the goals they had set, and I'm very specific with this language, I would ask them, what got in your way? Okay? There's no implication there that there's anything wrong with that individual, is there? What got in your way? There's something wrong with the system. So implicit in that language is a statement that, look, I know you're a good, dependable worker, you're bright, you're talented, you're committed, you take pride in your work, you know, you've got all these great qualities. So if you didn't achieve one or two of the goals that you set out to achieve, then there's something wrong with the system. Let's figure out what's wrong. And so we would explore that. And here's the interesting thing. We explored that as a team. So in essence, I created an external consulting group within my own group, because the rest of the people didn't know the job as intimately as the person who had missed the goals. So when they would talk about the challenges they faced, what got in the way, I've got 8 or 10 people that are focused on figuring out a better way to do that. It's not just me. I'm not relying on just my experience, my background, my capabilities. I've got 10 capabilities, 10 talented people looking at this. And inevitably, somebody would come up with a solution, and we would streamline the process. So every week we're identifying, every week that somebody missed a goal, we were identifying an opportunity to streamline a process, to make some improvement that was going to help us be more productive going forward. And that was powerful. Plus, everybody on the team, the people on the team that are contributing to the solution, are feeling good about themselves. And again, their confidence is growing as part of that overall process. Now, one of my roles as manager is to kind of manage expectations, because what we have is kind of a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you've got the overly cautious, the people that are only going to commit to 1 or 2, maybe 3 goals because they want to make sure they can achieve them. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the person who, despite having a heavy workload and all of it valuable work the coming week, if I asked them to do something, if I said I had a new project, they'd go, me, I want to do that. And you'd have to manage those expectations. So again, I was very specific in the language. If I had the me type person, somebody that already had a lot of work to do and it was valuable work, I would say that. I said, I appreciate your willingness to help out here, but I'm looking at what you've got set for next week, and those are some pretty aggressive goals. Your plate's pretty full, and it's all valuable work. So I appreciate that, but let's see if we can find somebody else to take it this week. And I manage the expectation that way. On the other end of the spectrum, if I had somebody that was very cautious, then what I would say is, I'd really appreciate it if you would try to achieve these other two goals on top of it. I know I'm asking you to stretch. That's specific. I know I'm asking you to stretch because in their minds I am. But I knew in my mind it was a slam dunk. They were going to make it. There was not going to be a problem with it. And I said, if you don't make it, if you don't make those extra two, I'm not going to beat up on you, but will you give it a shot? And they go, yeah, okay. And then when they achieve that, then I praised them appropriately. And again, what I saw was the confidence growing week in and week out because they saw their successes. They were seeing them every week, and it was reinforcing their own belief in their own skill sets and their own capabilities. Now, there are times when you'll have an employee who, for one reason or another, just isn't with the program. And one of the things I would talk about in the initial meeting is that I will never criticize you, I will never demean you in front of your peers. Never. That's a promise I made to each and every one of them. So let's take a scenario in which we've got a poor performer. And I'm going to share with you what I normally did and see if you can pick up on what it was that I did. So I'm going to ask Karen and John and Brian to be the three people. And Karen is going to have done an exceptional, she had committed to 5 goals and she completed 7. And I said, Karen, that's amazing. I cannot believe that you got those extra 2 done. I mean, that 5 I thought was more than enough for last week, and you got 7. Amazing. John hit every goal that he committed to. John, dependable, as always, right on target. You committed and you did everything you said you were going to do. Brian, unfortunately, buddy, I'm going to make you the poor performer here, okay? So Brian tells me that he didn't hit his goals, 2 or 3 of his goals. My response is, okay, what are your goals for next week? So what did I do and what message did it send? No praise. I didn't criticize, I didn't demean, but I withheld praise, didn't I? So withholding praise sent the message, I'm not real happy with that. But I'm staying true to my promise. I'm not criticizing you, I'm not demeaning you in front of your peers. I just withheld the praise. Now, if that persisted, then I'd have to do something about it. And I had a 3 and out policy. So let's say that Brian missed those goals that first week, and I asked him what he was going to do the following week, and he set his new goals and priorities, and the following week he missed again. That's meeting number 1. And I wouldn't call him, have him stay back. I wouldn't ask him to come into my office right after the meeting. I'd wait an hour or 2, or maybe longer, and say, hey, Brian, can I chat with you? Yeah. So he'd come in. And I would take the blame the first time. First meeting, I take the blame. Maybe I wasn't clear in my expectations. Maybe I wasn't clear in my communications. This is really what I'm looking for. And then I'd ask him, do you understand? Does that make sense? Any questions? He'd go, no, that's fine. I get it. Following week, Brian misses again. I wait, call him in. This time I'm not taking the blame. It's Brian, I don't know what's going on. But you told me you understood what I was looking for, and I'm still not seeing the result. So I don't know what's happening here, but I can tell you this. If we have another meeting, it'll be the last meeting we have. And Brian would go off with his goals and priorities. If he missed them again the third week, that was it. He was gone. Now here's what's amazing about this whole system in that kind of scenario. You don't end up with people at the water cooler saying, oh, gee, do you see what Dale did to Brian? Wasn't that awful? He wasn't being fair to him at all. Here's what really happened. I had to let a woman go, and her best friend in the department came up to me later in the day and said, it's her fault she's not here. You gave her every opportunity to be successful. You were offering her suggestions during the meeting on how she could accomplish those goals, and she didn't do anything about it. The rest of us were offering suggestions. She didn't take any of those. It's her fault that she's not here. Big turnaround, right? Very, very powerful tool for me. And it amazed me. I didn't expect that at all. But there was no conversation about whether or not I had been fair with anyone. Didn't happen. And interestingly, a few years later, I did a project for a company that had a morale issue. And we dealt with the morale issue, and then I did this training for their supervisors. And this one young woman came up to me after the training and she said, you know, Dale, everybody in my department is going to love this program, except 2 people. She said, how do I deal with that? I said, you won't have to. She said, what do you mean I won't have to? I said, you won't have to deal with it. Your team will deal with it. She said, you're kidding. I said, no. So she had her first meeting, laid it all out. As expected, these 2 people said, I don't like this. We're not going to do that. And she said, the other team members said, well, if that's the way you feel, why don't you leave? If you don't want to be part of the team, why don't you go? We don't need you around here. She said, I never had to say a word. I said, yeah. Because the people that want to be part of a team that's going to do better and produce more, be more successful, and enjoy all the satisfaction and the pride and the success that's associated with that, don't want to be around people that don't want to do that don't have that same mindset. Doesn't become a problem at all. So it's a simple system. In the beginning, that first meeting and maybe the next 2 or 3 after that may take you, 2 hours if you've got 8 or 10 people in your department. May take a couple of hours to do that. After that first month, everybody knows what the process is. They come in with their goals and priorities already set, and it takes a half hour. So for a half hour a week, you get these kind of results. It's one of the most powerful systems that I've ever seen and I've ever used. And it's one that I continue to coach clients on today. Any questions? Well, it's, number one, most people have that mindset. Most workers have that mindset. If the employees aren't performing to expectation, then it's typically something wrong with the system. It's not because people don't care and they don't want to do it. Now, if they've been mistreated by a manager, then yeah, that's a different story.
Sure.
But by and large, people take pride in what they do. They want to do well. They want to be successful. It feels good to be successful, and we want that feeling. So all I'm doing is tapping into a motivation that already exists. And for people that don't want to, that team that we saved $16,000 out of a $40,000 budget, there were a department of 16 people, 4 of them left, 4 degreed accountants left that first year because they didn't like this system. I didn't fire them. They just decided they didn't like it there and they left. We didn't replace them. The rest of the team picked up all that work. Well, I told them that, number one, that there were a lot of things that I wanted to achieve, and I couldn't achieve them on my own. I needed their help. And I also realized that they were busy already. They had full plates already, and that we would have to work together to figure out ways to eliminate system inefficiencies, to duplications of effort and things like that. And so we were going to work on that together. Well, that approach, number one, offered them an incentive. Because one of the things that we as employees don't like is doing the same thing over and over, day in and day out, right? It's just not a lot of fun. It's not very exciting. We don't get to learn anything new. If you look at the Fortune 100 best companies to work for and why people say they like to work there, autonomy and variety in the work, right? Those are the two things they're looking for. That's what this system does. It gives them that chance to have some input. And then when they do streamline a process and they've got some more free time, then I always had a list of things that I wanted to accomplish, and I could assign that to them, and they would tackle something new, and they get to learn something new and get the joy of that variety in their work, so they weren't always doing the same things. Does that answer your question? Yeah. But I would do that. I'd just say, look, this is what I've got, all these things that I want to accomplish, and I can't do it on my own. I need your help, but I know we have to figure out a way to get things done more efficiently in order for you to have time to help me out.
Were there people that had certain responsibilities within the group?
There were. I'm glad you brought that up, Karen, because I forgot to talk about that. One of the things as the manager then, when we were setting goals and priorities, if somebody had a lot of goals and the very high priority types of efforts that they needed to do in the coming week, more than any one individual could possibly handle, I would shift some of that workload to somebody who, was busy. They had a full plate too, but it wasn't high priority stuff, high value stuff that they were doing. So we'd shift some of the high value stuff. Well, in the process of doing that, again, the people are getting a chance to work on something different, something new, learn something new. But at the same time, what's happening? They're cross-training, aren't they? They're cross-training, and they're getting to know one another's jobs. So when somebody's on vacation, somebody's out sick, it's not a big deal. Other people know how to do that. Now, I can tell you, if I went into that group and said to them, okay, we're going to start cross-training, what kind of reaction do you think I would get? Who's getting fired, right? That's the question that goes to everybody's mind. Who's getting fired? Because if you're doing cross-training, you're planning on getting rid of somebody here, right? I never said cross-training, just we'll reassign this and we'll reassign that. And they all understood why this was a priority over that, and so the cross-training happened, and nobody ever said cross-training, and everybody loved it. Well, the system is designed to help identify what's really most important for the success of that department or that group, whatever the case might be. And in doing that, you eliminate some of the things, you postpone some of the less important items or less urgent items, you postpone those. So part of the role of a manager in the business is to create that balance in the system, okay? And the example that I like to use is, years ago I read Brian Greene's Fabric of the Cosmos. And in there he talks about entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. And basically entropy says that physical states tend toward disorder. And he uses this example of an ice cube. It's a very structured state, but left on its own, it's going to migrate to this messy state of water, right? So in the programs, what I do is I ask managers, I said, so what do we need to do to maintain this structured state? And they'll say, well, we have to add cold temperature. I said, okay, but if we add too much cold temperature, what happens? the ice fractures and it splinters, right? Becomes brittle. So if we put too much cold temperature, that's what happens. So in order to keep that solid state of an ice cube, we have to apply the right amount of cold temperature, don't we? We have to maintain a balance in that cold temperature. Isn't that the same thing that we as managers have to do? At times when people are overwhelmed, there's just too much coming at them, they can't possibly handle it all. Isn't it our job to extract from the system the things that are really not essential and focus on the high priority, high value items and keep them focused on those and remove some of that stress from that workplace for them? And at times when things are slower, isn't it our job to infuse some projects into the system that have real value? Nobody likes to have their time spent on busy work. Projects that have some real value so that their skills don't wane, so that they don't lose their focus, so they don't develop sloppy work habits. And to me, that's the primary role of a manager. And this system, it's all I was doing, is I was balancing the pressure in the system.